Howdy my fellow Tubular gamers. We're back with another video. Where the fuck are we going?
So all the rumors were true, that it's time for another ranking video, and this is going to be a big one. It's finally time we talk about the Ninja Gaiden games. Now Ninja Gaiden, at this point, I don't think this one really needs much of an introduction. It is the longest running series of ninja games and is easily the most famous series of ninja games. The notoriously difficult series where they make you feel like an absolute badass. They really make you feel like Spider-Man, or Ninja. And it stars easily the most prolific ninja in all of gaming with Ryu Hayabusa. It's still kinda shocking Ryu hasn't made it to Smash, but that's not what today's video is about. Today we're gonna be ranking every Ninja Gaiden game from worst to best. Yep, that's right. All of them. We'll be ranking the old games, the new games, all the games, except the mobile games. As per usual with my list, I won't be looking at any mobile or JP exclusive titles, but outside of that, all the Ninja Gaiden games are getting ranked here. The 2D ones, the 3D ones, the 4D ones, if any exist. I'm really taking a gander at all of these. I'm going to be giving each one of them a little review. It's not going to be just a quick little ranking and that's it. No, each one of these games is getting a dedicated time to shine, where I'll be sharing my thoughts, feelings, memories, etc. As always, I'm a bit of a yapper, so get out the popcorn, get the Wendy's spicy nuggets, the beef jerky, start the car up, start going to bed, keep grinding away at your 9 to 5, however you're going to watch or listen to this video. It's going to be a minute. Several, actually. I will also admit that in the past, I have ranked every 2D and 3D Ninja Gaiden game, and this is essentially a combination of the two lists. And so, if you watched both of those prior videos, things are going to be pretty familiar here. My stance hasn't exactly changed. And like my 3D Ninja Gaiden list, I'm going to be combining all of the versions of these games into one. For instance, Ninja Gaiden 2 has 3 different versions. I'm combining them all into one entry since they're all pretty similar to each other. But if you've forgotten about or haven't seen those videos, welcome. I'm totally Tubular Jonathan. Nice to meet you. I hope you're having a wonderful day. We do ranking videos around here. If you like what you see, please like, share, comment, subscribe. Let me know your favorite Ninja Gaiden games down below. I would genuinely love to know. We also have a Discord where we chat all things games. There's no drama there. And I hope to see every single one of y'all in the channel. So with that in mind, let's get to the list. This intro's gone on more than long enough. Out of all the Ninja Gaiden games, what truly is the worst of the series? And so here we have Ninja Gaiden Shadow releasing for the Game Boy in 1991. I believe this to be not only the weakest Ninja Gaiden title, but an overall average to mediocre experience. Look, this is a Game Boy game at the end of the day, and so obviously you gotta give it a little leeway, but when you compare this game to all of the other games in the series, yeah, it's not even close for me personally. This is the weakest. So the game is actually a prequel to the NES games, but there isn't all that much of a story here. There's even less than what was in the NES games. And speaking of less than the NES games, we have Ryu's movement. It is very limited in this game. In the NES games, he could latch onto anything and really scale just about any wall. You can't do that here. Yeah, you do get a grappling hook, but you're just not as mobile as you are in the NES games. His moveset is a lot more limited as well. Obviously, he can, use his sword for a very basic attack, but the only other attack he has is the fire wheel. Yeah, Ryu's moveset just feels watered down when compared to the NES game, and I think that's the best way I would describe this game as a whole, just watered down NES Ninja Gaiden. The actual moment-to-moment gameplay of this game is basically the same as the NES titles, but everything is less than. It's got really basic level design, it's not really vertical, Ryu can't do as much, the boss fights aren't exciting, the game in general isn't all that exciting, it's a lot slower, and there's obviously way less colors since it's a Game Boy game. I'm not going to act like this is the worst Game Boy game I've ever played, it's far, far away from that, but I wouldn't exactly recommend this game either. If you're somebody who likes old school Ninja Gaiden, you're probably better off just going back to the NES games. There's not a whole lot to this one, and I'd rather play legit any other title in the series. And so here we have Ninja Gaiden releasing for the Game Gear in 1991. Yeah, the Game Gear got its own standalone Ninja Gaiden title. This isn't a port or anything like that. It really is its own standalone game, and it's not that good. It's about on the same quality as the Ninja Gaiden Game Boy game, but I slightly prefer the Game Gear title over the Game Boy one because I like the colors more. Sometimes it's as simple as that. When it comes to the plot, it's pretty basic stuff here. Somebody attacks Ryu's village and he goes after them. Like, what did you really expect here? When it comes to the actual gameplay, yeah, it's pretty similar to the NES Ninja Gaiden titles. Obviously, it is a lot more basic and, like the Game Boy game, watered down from the NES games, but it is less watered down than the Game Boy title. I guess it's diet water. Ryu's moveset is more in line with the NES titles here. For some reason he jumps really high, it's like a straight moon jump, but he can actually scale just about everything in this game. He does of course have his sword slash, but he also has 4 different secondary weapons that help lead to a little bit more variety with the gameplay. Not that it really needs it, this game is under an hour long, and when it comes to the level design, yeah, it's pretty basic stuff here. It's all just kind of there. I really don't have all that much to say about it. It's not like it has horrible enemy placement. This game isn't particularly difficult, but it also doesn't do anything out of the ordinary, and I wouldn't say it was all that memorable. At least the colors in the game are nice. I like how everything pops, and the music ain't all that bad either. Would I recommend this game nowadays? Probably not. I mean, I've certainly played worse Game Gear games, but you could also do a lot better, not only on this system, but in this series as well. But hey, if you're a die-hard old school Ninja Gaiden fan who's gotta play all the old games, go ahead and try it. And so here we have another game just titled Ninja Gaiden, but this one was released for the Master System in 1992. This game actually never released in North America or Japan, only releasing in Europe, but it can obviously still be played nowadays thanks to dubious methods. But are you really missing anything with this one? Honestly, I'd have this game, the Game Gear game, and the Game Boy game pretty much all at the same level in terms of quality. They're all just watered down versions of the NES game, but between the three, I would give a slight edge to the Master System game. It plays the most like the NES game, it's the least watered down, I guess it's just spicy water, and it even introduces a few new things of its own. When it comes to how Ryu feels and his movement, it is very similar to the NES games, but instead of clinging to walls and climbing up them, he actually runs across the walls, which is pretty similar to how later Ninja Gaiden games, the 3D ones, would do things. But I mean, this is cool enough and you still get to interact with the walls. Of course, Ryu can do his sword slash, and he has a few other special attacks. When it comes to the level design, it's a bit more advanced than what the Game Boy and Game Gear had, but it still doesn't really compete with the NES games, and even though it's not as difficult as those games, I also didn't find it as enjoyable or memorable. When it comes to this game's story, man, Ryu's village just gets massacred again. I don't know how many times his village has been massacred, but it's hard to believe that there's even a village at all with the amount of times everybody's been wiped out. At the end of the day, should you even bother with Ninja Gaiden for the Master System? Well, you really have to go out of your way to play this one, and yeah, I don't really know if it's worth it. Only for the most die-hard of Ninja Gaiden fans could I even kind of recommend this one, but again, you might as well just stick with the NES games. And here we have the original Ninja Gaiden, the one that started all, releasing initially in 1988 for the arcades. It has since been ported to many different home computers and consoles. So despite being the first game in the series, it's actually pretty different from the rest of the Ninja Gaiden games. You don't even play as Ryu Hayabusa. You just play as this anonymous ninja, or two if you're playing in co-op, who was hired by the government to go defeat an evil cult, and that's really it. The game sees you going across America through 6 different levels, just beating the absolute shit out of everything. Something that makes this game very different from all of the other 2D Ninja Gaiden games is that this game is not a platformer, like, at all. It's a beat 'em up, actually. Yes, you can jump, you can even cling to the walls, but the game doesn't actually have you do like any platforming. 99% of the gameplay is beat 'em up. And I would say that the beat 'em up gameplay is most comparable to Double Dragon. It feels very similar to Double Dragon. It's an 80s style brawler. So don't come in here expecting it to feel anything like Streets of Rage or Comic Zone. It does not feel that good. It feels okay at best. It feels rather stiff. There are a few combos you can do here, but they don't feel particularly amazing. And the game can also be brutally difficult since it was, you know, originally an arcade game trying to gobble up all your money. This thing be gobbling up quarters faster than I be gobbling up Wendy's spicy nuggets. Like, this game will just kick your ass. The enemies in this game can just be relentless. They have no problem gaining up on you, pushing you into the corner, and just beating the absolute shit out of you. And it absolutely can lead to some frustration, but I guess that was just beat 'em ups in the 80s. Despite being a general fan of beat 'em ups, I'm not gonna lie, I don't love this game. Like, it's okay, but it hasn't aged all that well. It's pretty short. It really just doesn't feel all that nice, even when compared to Double Dragon, and yeah, having a second person certainly makes it more enjoyable, but shit, I've made DMV visits enjoyable because there was a second person. That doesn't fucking mean anything. At least for the time, the game looks nice and it has some decent enough little music. Should you play it nowadays? If you really want to see where the Ninja Gaiden series got its start, go ahead and try it. But this is one of the rare instances where I think the home console port is actually way better than the arcade original. So here we got Yaiba Ninja Gaiden Z, releasing initially in 2014. This might be the strangest game in the entire Ninja Gaiden series. And really, it's more of a spin-off than anything else, but I also think that it's easily the weakest 3D Ninja Gaiden game. Now, I remember back when this game came out, I was actually pretty excited for it. I pre-ordered it and everything, and then I got it at release and went, huh, this isn't really all that great. So the first thing you're probably wondering, especially if you're unfamiliar with this game, is what the heck is a Yaiba? Well, Yaiba is the main character of this game. No, you do not play as Ryu Hayabusa. You play as this new character, a powerful ninja known as Yaiba Kamikaze, and he's just kind of a psychopath, and at one point he fights Ryu Hayabusa, who promptly whips his ass, mocks him, and even kills him. However, Yaiba actually is brought back to life by this weird organization known as Forge Industries, and he makes it his mission to go after Ryu. There's a bunch of other things going on in the background, but even if I'm not huge on this game, I'm still not going to spoil the story. The story in this game, yeah, I'll just be blunt, it's bad. Look, Ninja Gaiden has never had great stories, and oftentimes the stories just kind of devolve into nonsense, but this really takes things to another level. Why would I want to fight Ryu Hayabusa? Why would I want to go up against the series protagonist? This Yaiba guy is so wildly unlikable. He's just a total shithead and honestly gets what he deserves when Ryu schmurders him, but no, they bring him back and he's our main protagonist, and it's like, you want this guy to be the character we're rooting for? You want him to be the anti-hero or whatever they were going for here? No, Yaiba's not a good protagonist. This story is one of the worst that the series has ever seen, and that really is saying something, and I look back and I'm just like, what the fuck was anyone thinking here? But hey, the story's never been the focal point of Ninja Gaiden. It's always been all about the gameplay, and the gameplay of Yaiba is a mixed bag, if we're being nice. I'd say it's a mixed bag full of Fruit Loops staples and the occasional pushpin. It is, for the most part, pain. Like the other Ninja Gaiden games, it is a 3D hack and slash, where you will indeed be hacking and slashing, but this combat feels nowhere near as good as any of the other 3D Ninja Gaiden games. Outside of the DS game, all of the other 3D Ninja Gaiden games have really tight, smooth, weighted controls that take a minute to master. There's some actual heft to them. There's some momentum. Positioning matters, and most of all, those games actually feel good. This game does not. The combat feels very weightless, floaty, and all over the place. Your weapons don't have the same impact that they do in really any other Ninja Gaiden game. The enemies don't react accordingly. The gore is nowhere near as good as the previous games. It just doesn't have the same kind of flow or pacing to it that legit any of the other Ninja Gaiden games have. And you go, okay, it doesn't have to be exactly the same. It can be a little different. See, that's the thing. Not only is it different, but it's bad. It just doesn't feel good. It's not satisfying. It doesn't come together in a conclusive way. The combat feels incredibly sloppy. It kind of just feels thrown together with duct tape. It's incredibly slippery. It's been hanging out with P. Diddy way too much. None of the weapons really feel good at all. Not even the executions feel good, which is just a sin for a Ninja Gaiden game. And it doesn't matter that there's, quote, depth, since there actually is a fair amount of combos, because all of it just kind of feels like shit. And when it comes to the enemy roster and their strategies, there's pretty much nothing here. For the most part, you're fighting literally mindless zombies, where they either go down faster than a tweaker at Jack in the Box and the Munchie Meal, or they're the most spongy enemies imaginable, putting SpongeBob to shame, and it just feels like it takes forever to defeat. The combat is not good, straight up. There's these elements that are thrown in there, like fire, electricity, poison, and this doesn't really add anything or enhance the combat whatsoever. And from time to time you'll even get these big fuck you weapons, but these don't feel anywhere near as powerful as they should, and of course there's plenty of wonderful quick time events. I just don't really have anything nice to say about the combat. The entire game also features fixed camera angles, and despite them being fixed, they're usually terrible, and you'll find yourself getting hit from attacks off screen where you had no idea that the attack was even coming, and yeah, you just get hit, and that's totally unfair. Speaking of unfair, this game can feel pretty unfair at times. It's difficult. It's definitely got that Ninja Gaiden difficulty to it, but it feels more cheap and annoying than anything else. The boss fights are so spongy and annoying in this game. They just take way too long to defeat. Yeah, the combat sucks, and the combat is like 90-95% of this game, so the game by default kind of sucks. When it comes to the presentation, it's interesting. That's certainly what it is. The game goes for a cel-shaded art style that doesn't look terrible, but man, is this game ugly. It just has such an ugly aesthetic and vibe to it, which is clearly what they were going for, and part of me kind of likes that. I like that the game is going for something different, but why did it have to be so fucking ugly? Like, come on now. At least the music is good, like really good. It was done by Grant Kirkhope of Banjo-Kazooie, Donkey Kong 64 fame, and oh yeah, he hits here. It's got a great soundtrack that I still listen to this day. And there were times that I was playing this where I went, you know, I think I'd rather dive into oncoming traffic than continue with this. It's easily the best aspect of this game. Really, it's the only good aspect. The gameplay sucks, the story sucks, it's ugly as sin. And so with that in mind and this rant finishing up, I think it's pretty obvious how I feel about it. I absolutely do not recommend it. And so here we have Ninja Gaiden 3: The Ancient Ship of Doom, releasing initially for the NES in 1991. So the game takes place in between Ninja Gaiden 1 and 2, the NES games that is, and it's about Ryu Hayabusa trying to clear his name after he gets framed for murder. Like the other two NES games, there are plenty of cutscenes here, and it was impressive then, and it's even impressive now that an NES game has this many cutscenes, this much story to it, and this much detail to the cutscenes. When it comes to the game's overall graphical quality, I mean, it's pretty basic. It's an NES game after all, and it looks very similar to the prior two games, but I do think it's a good looking NES game at the very least, and it's got some real nice sound effects. When it comes to the gameplay, it is very similar to the prior two Ninja Gaiden games. Ryu feels and moves in a very similar manner to how he did in the two prior games. He does actually have a new ability though. He can hang overhead from pipes and ivy, allowing him to swing and just generally hang on to them. And I think this is a neat little addition, and it certainly allows the level design to get much more complicated. And of course, Ryu's got his sword slash and all of his little ninja abilities, and all of this seems well and good. In fact, it's pretty much the same as the prior two games. However, like the prior two games, this game is hard, but it's not just hard, it's really fucking hard. This is arguably the hardest game in the entire Ninja Gaiden series. It's like the hardest NES game of them all, and that really is saying something. This game isn't gonna just kick your ass. It's going to beat the shit out of you, set your house on fire, kidnap your dog, and run over your hamster for good measure. Like, this game does not want you happy. It does not want you to get past even the first level. It is not messing around. It is as serious as it gets. All the bullshit and nonsense from the previous two games, oh, it's here in full force. It's here and then some. Like, the amount of bullshit in this game is just immeasurable. You'll find more bullshit in this game than you would on a farm. It's ridiculous. The enemy placement is out of control in this game. Enemies are purposely put in like the most annoying positions so that they always get in your way. They're always respawning, and there's so many bottomless pits. I think there might actually be more bottomless pits than solid ground in the game overall. You'd find more solid ground in Skyloft from Skyward Sword than you'll find in this game. And so all of this leads to you dying over and 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 over again. And you know, with all of this, it comes to a point when the game just stops being all that enjoyable. Like, the game just becomes so brutally difficult and frustrating that I stop having fun with it, and it really is just more frustrating than anything else. This is one of those games where I think it's so brutally difficult that I have a hard time recommending it. If you're looking for one of the very hardest NES games of all time, like we're talking Ghosts and Goblins, Castlevania 3 difficulty, then go ahead, be my absolute guest and go try it out. Otherwise, yeah, it's not exactly the easiest recommendation. You know, when you're not getting pissed off and frustrated, it is actually a pretty decent platformer. But if you want to get into this, you need to be a hardcore Ninja Gaiden fan. I've never beaten this game. I'm probably not going to beat this game. It's just too damn hard and too damn annoying. And so here we have Ninja Gaiden Dragon Sword releasing for the DS in 2008. This is one of the stranger Ninja Gaiden titles and probably the most gimmicky of them all. And yes, it very much is a 3D game. So when it comes to this game's story, it's set in between Ninja Gaiden Black and Ninja Gaiden 2. And it sees Ryu Hayabusa rebuilding the Hayabusa village when one of the main characters / villagers, Mamaji, is kidnapped by the Black Spider Ninja clan, and so it's up to Ryu to go find her and uncover the secrets behind these mysterious dragon stones. The story for the most part is relatively basic. It's not as advanced or complex as the main 3D Ninja Gaiden titles, and that's fine with me. You know, it gets the job done and it's not unbelievably shockingly stupid, and so yeah, that's pretty decent for Ninja Gaiden. Now, when it comes to actually playing this game, it's pretty different from legit any of the other Ninja Gaiden games. So, the game was released exclusively for the DS, and you would actually hold it sideways like a book. And a few other games did this on DS as well. If you remember, Brain Age or Hotel Dusk Room 215, and even Guitar Hero on DS did this. But this concept was rarely seen on the DS. I do think this game, though, is probably the best execution of it outside of Brain Age, and it actually works despite how unconventional it is. Speaking of unconventional, we have the game's control method. You already know with this being a DS title that you're going to be tapping on that screen, and yeah, pretty much everything is done by tapping on the screen. It's actually pretty similar to Zelda Phantom Hourglass, where you either have to tap or hold or draw on the screen in order to do attacks and techniques. The game really uses a combination of buttons and drawing or tapping on the screen in order to do basically anything in this game, and while it sounds really cumbersome and gimmicky, I gotta say that it still surprisingly works decently well. Yeah, it is really gimmicky and it's actually better on a real DS versus an emulator, but this isn't the worst control scheme I've ever seen on the DS, far from it, and while it was starting to give me carpal tunnel and giving me the ouchie ouchies, it is functional. It actually does come together to create some half decent gameplay here. The actual moment-to-moment gameplay outside of tapping all over the screen is really just combat. You're moving in pretty linear fashion through these surprisingly pre-rendered environments, pretty much just annihilating everything in your path. There isn't really any exploration or puzzles here, it's just combat encounter to combat encounter. And while it does take a minute to get used to the controls and how the combat feels, it's again more well put together than you might expect. Like, this actually has some cool moments and set pieces to it. It's not all that bad. They really tried with this. They wanted a full Ninja Gaiden game on handheld, and for the most part I think they succeeded. It's certainly not perfect, and it's not one of the very best Ninja Gaiden games. I mean, the controls are still gimmicky at the end of the day. They still have quite a steep learning curve, and you do kind of get carpal tunnel from playing it. The camera can be a bit finicky, and the environments can look a bit funky, especially with the 3D models. But thankfully, it doesn't go on too long. It's one of the shorter Ninja Gaiden titles, and probably the shortest 3D one. The music ain't even half bad either. The game has genuinely aged way better than I thought it would. I expected to come back to this and just be like, what is this gimmicky mess of a game? Even Yaiba's better, but no, I'd rather play this than Yaiba. Playing through this game sounds a lot more appealing than the electric chair, which is not something I can say about Yaiba. Regardless of all that, do I recommend the game? Yes and no. If you're somebody that loves the Ninja Gaiden series, then it might be worth checking out, but you also kind of have to go out of your way to play it nowadays. This is one of those games where I would say it's actually way better on original hardware than an emulator, which makes it even less accessible, but hey, if you have a DS and you're looking for a game that's actually pretty decent, this might be one worth checking out. And so here we have Ninja Gaiden 2 The Dark Sword of Chaos, releasing initially for the NES in 1990. So I think the best way I can describe Ninja Gaiden 2 is that they looked at the original Ninja Gaiden and just went, let's do more of that. When it comes to this game's story, it takes place after the first game, and it sees the main antagonist returning, and it's up to Ryu to stop him. Like the first game, there's actually a fair amount of cutscenes here that have a good amount of detail, and it really actually does tell some kind of story with plot progression, characters, dialogue, and even a little bit of world building, which you really wouldn't expect from an NES game, especially a non-RPG NES game, but it very much is appreciated. And the cutscenes genuinely do have a lot of detail to them. The game itself, though, looks pretty much identical to the first game. And it plays pretty much identical to the first game as well. It still sees you playing as Ryu Hayabusa, who is very mobile. He can cling onto walls and climb them. He has his sword. And then of course he has a bunch of ninja abilities. And these abilities absolutely kick ass. The shurikens return, there's the invincible fire wheel, and there's even a new ability. Yeah, in this game Ryu can actually, quote, split his body and clone himself. When he makes the clone of himself, that clone will follow behind him and copy every move that Ryu makes, including climbing, jumping, and even attacking. And with this technique, Ryu can actually strategically line up the clones to easily take out bosses and enemies. This is actually a pretty cool feature, and it does become very useful, especially as you get later in the game. And that's because, unsurprisingly, this game is also incredibly difficult. It's not as difficult as Ninja Gaiden 3, that game is just overly punishing, but this is still a very, very difficult game. This one's just gonna burn your house down. But it might also tell you that your favorite local restaurant sucks on Yelp. But hey, I'll take that over whatever the third game was doing. The level design is pretty decent for the most part, and there's actually some really cool areas and bosses, but a lot of the time the enemies are just in the worst possible areas. They're respawning all the damn time, and you're going to need some really good reflexes if you want to get anywhere in this game. But once you start to master these levels, you remember where all of the enemies are placed and you're able to react accordingly, man, you feel like a ninja. You feel like an absolute badass. There are very few other NES games that make you feel this cool, but it is going to take a minute for you to get there. Like, this is not an easy game, but it certainly is a rewarding one. When I'm not ready to pull out whatever hair I still have left on my head, I am actually enjoying what this game is offering. Many people have gone down to say that this is one of the best sequels to anything on the NES, and I would absolutely agree. While it still is just generally more of the same, it still is enjoyable, and if you're somebody that likes old school 2D platformers and you're okay with a bit of challenge, this is one that is totally worth checking out, especially if you're a fan of the series. So here we got Ninja Gaiden 3, which originally released in 2012, and for this list I'll be talking specifically about the Razor's Edge version, which I believe to be the definitive way to play through Ninja Gaiden 3. I actually got the original game when it came out and thought it was pretty decent, but then many years later I played through the Razor's Edge version on the Master Collection and went, yeah, it's not even close. Razor's Edge is way better than the original game, so that's what I'm sticking with here. Now, over the years, Ninja Gaiden 3 has been a bit overhated in my opinion. While it absolutely does have flaws and it is the weakest of the trilogy, I still think this game is pretty entertaining and you can have a fair amount of fun with it. Despite saying that, when it comes to this game's story, yeah, I don't really have any love for this. The story starts with Ryu being called into London to take on some mysterious terrorist group who then infects his right arm with a bunch of voodoo nonsense, and his arm becomes all ugly, bloody, and generally just unpleasant to look at, and so it's up to Ryu to figure out how to get rid of this curse and take out this new terrorist organization. Out of all the Ninja Gaiden games, this one has one of the worst plots. It's not the worst, I don't think anything's gonna sink lower than Yaiba, but man is it dumb as shit. The writing, characters, storyline, plot progression, dialogue, it just doesn't really come together. It's not too interesting, it's bland, it's generic, it's uninspired, it drags on, and by the end of it, I just felt really indifferent, which is like the worst feeling I can have for a plot. I also think that it's honestly a little too prevalent in the game. There are several sequences where you just walk forward slowly listening to dialogue, and obviously this is all over games nowadays. But does this really belong in an action-packed Ninja Gaiden title? Yeah, I don't think so. The story and everything to do with it, I wasn't really big on it, and Razor's Edge adds a little bit more story, and yeah, I just couldn't really care here. So when it comes to the gameplay, it isn't all that different from Ninja Gaiden 2. It still sees you slicing and dicing your way through pretty much everything in sight. And the game, at least the Razor's Edge version, still has some of the most visceral combat you'll find in a game from this era. While it isn't unbelievably over the top when it comes to its violence like say the second game, it's still a pretty gory affair. And you're regularly chopping dudes up like they're sushi or lines of cocaine. Don't ask me how I know that. When it comes to how Ryu himself and the combat feels, I think it actually feels pretty good. It's still weighted, there's a bit of wind up, and positioning really does matter here. It's easy to pick up and play, but there is actually a little bit of depth here. Unfortunately, just to be straight up here, it does feel a bit streamlined from the previous two games, and there's less weapons than the previous two games as well. This is like the most common complaint about Ninja Gaiden 3, is that it feels a bit overly simplified, and yeah, there's absolutely some merit to that. It's one of those cases where it's all style, no substance. There just isn't as much depth or complexity to this title, especially when you compare it to the two prior games, and one of the reasons that there's not as much depth is the lacking enemy roster. The enemy roster just isn't very good in this game. Like 80-85% of the roster is just regular dudes. Really, outside of the bosses, you're just fighting regular dudes most of the time. And yeah, it's fun to chop the shit out of them, where you get to chop them up like they're your vegetables for a salad or something, but it does start to get old, especially by the end of it. Where's all the cool demons and creatures and monsters? Where's the enemy variety? I've looked all over and I just can't find it. It's either dudes with swords, dudes with guns, or annoying motherfucker with rocket launcher in the corner. This game loves to do that and I always hate it. It seems like all the creatures and cool monsters are saved for the boss fights. And the boss fights, yeah, there are some decent ones here. I'm not going to act like they're all terrible. Fighting the dinosaur was pretty entertaining, but it feels like for every good boss fight, there's a stinker in there, like where you fight this annoying helicopter. And since I'm already bitching and complaining, let's whine some more. This game is littered with quick time events, and I hate like all of these. These are so annoying, like when you're climbing the wall, and they just don't add anything. It feels like they're sprinkled in there for the sake of being in there. Some enemies just feel way too spongy in this game, especially a lot of the bosses. Really, all of the bosses I don't like are super spongy, and the final boss is just an abomination. It's shockingly bad, and maybe the low point for this entire game. It really is that bad. I've already brought up this game's depth, or really lack of depth, but I do want to say that at times this game can get pretty mindless. And there are plenty of times where it really feels like you can just turn your brain off and hack away at everything you see. You won't need any strategy. Outside of rocket launcher motherfuckers, you don't really have to prioritize any enemies over other ones, and most of them won't really give you a run for their money. And while I like playing games where I can turn my brain off from time to time, I also got to remind you, this is a Ninja Gaiden game, you know, like one of the hardest series of video games ever. So for the game to generally not demand the utmost of you is kind of a cardinal sin. This game in general isn't very challenging, and I think I died the least in it of any of the mainline Ninja Gaiden titles. I even died more in Yaiba. And so yeah, if you couldn't tell, this game is a little bit of a mixed bag. While it can be some mindless fun, and it does absolutely have some great and entertaining moments to it, it is also lacking a bit in the depth, complexity, variety, difficulty, and story. However, if you're looking for just a mindless hack and slash you can get a few hours of fun out of, this might be worth checking out, especially if you thought the other games were just too difficult. This one is a lot simpler and digestible. I'm not going to act like I didn't have any fun with this game. That's just simply not true. There were plenty of times where I enjoyed myself. It's just when compared to the other mainline Ninja Gaiden titles, this game's just okay. And so here we have the game that really got the series on the map, with Ninja Gaiden releasing for the NES initially in 1989. While it might not have been the first game in the series, it really was the game, propelled the series forward, and really shaped Ninja Gaiden as we know it today. And all these years later, I think the game is still pretty good and easily the best of the NES trilogy. So when it comes to this game's plot, it stars our favorite ninja, Ryu Hayabusa, who's seeking revenge for the death of his father, but he ends up eventually getting involved in this world-threatening plot. The story, especially for an NES game, is actually quite good. There's a lot of detailed cutscenes, there's progression, there's dialogue, and for the late 80s, this was very impressive. And I think it's pretty decent even nowadays. It's arguably better than what even some of the 3D games have, honestly. But since this is an NES game, you know it was all about that gameplay first, and the gameplay in Ninja Gaiden, yeah, it is not messing around whatsoever. It is a balls to the walls, challenging as all hell 2D platformer. It will absolutely make you feel like a ninja. Ryu has a few different abilities. He can obviously jump, he has a sword slash, but he can also latch on to walls, and he can basically climb anything and jump off of it. He also gets a few special abilities that you can use if you have enough life, such as a shuriken, a boomerang-like shuriken, or you can send these twirling fireballs known as the Art of the Fire Wheel. The Fire Wheel was really good here, and it would continue to be really good in the whole ass series. And I'll just say, if you want to get anywhere in this game's 20 levels, you're going to have to master Ryu's moveset and how he feels. For the most part, he does feel pretty good. He's not as stiff as it might look, and you absolutely can get used to how he feels, but it's going to take a minute. The game is also very quick to become as punishing as it gets. While the game is not as difficult as, say, Ninja Gaiden 3, this is still a game that is going to test you beyond belief. This is one of the hardest video games ever made, and one of the hardest games on the platform. It is one of those games that just straight up demands perfection and mastery of these levels. You're going to have to remember where these these enemies are at, even if they are infinitely respawning. You're going to have very good reflexes, and honestly, it's just going to require a lot of practice. It is one of those games though that is very rewarding. When you finally are able to master some of these levels and you just run through and you're unstoppable, destroying everything in sight, it feels really freaking good. Very few other NES games will be as satisfying as this. And I think of all 3 of the NES titles, this game has the most balanced difficulty. It's hard, but it's not stupid fucking difficult like some of the later games. There are plenty of times where I wanted to rip my hair out, or at least what I had at the time, but there are also plenty of moments where I went, fuck yeah, I finally beat the level, hell yeah, this feels so good. The game has plenty of bosses to it, and man, these bosses are no joke either. The game in general is no joke. If it was a stand-up comedy show, man, it would be a terrible, terrible show. And I wouldn't dare bring my Wendy's spicy nuggets to it, nuh-uh-uh. But despite all that, I think this game is a total classic. It is a legendary 2D platformer that is one of those games that I think just about anybody should try. Even if you can't get past the first level, I still think it's worth trying the game and seeing how far the series has come. The game's aged decently well, the game still looks fine enough even with all the sprite flickering, and when it comes to the music, it's got some bops and beats. It's also pretty widely available. It's been re-released and is on NSO, which I'm pretty sure not even Ninja Gaiden 2 and 3 are. But anyway, the game's legendary for a reason. It's an absolute classic and worth your time. But then we have Ninja Gaiden Ragebound, the first 2D Ninja Gaiden in a very, very long time, and I gotta say, it's hands down the best 2D Ninja Gaiden of them all. Like, for me personally, it's not even close. The original's a classic, the other NES games are great and all, but this game kicks some serious ass, and it's one of the best 2D games of the last few years. They really looked at the old Ninja Gaiden games and said, what if we just brought that to the modern era? They didn't shoehorn in a bunch of new, strange mechanics, they didn't make it a Metroidvania. No, it is still a straight action platformer that really is all about kicking ass, and it's so much fun. So when it comes to this game's plot, it's actually pretty interesting. It runs parallel to the events of the original game. While Ryu's in America trying to avenge his father, he leaves the safety of Hayabusa village up to a new protagonist, Kenji Mozu, who is just trying to protect it, but things quickly get out of hand, and he ends up having to team up with someone from the Black Spider clan. The story is actually decently interesting, and it's probably the best story Ninja Gaiden has had in a very long time. I think it's pretty cool that it runs parallel to the original game. I think it's cool that it references the original game at all, and even though you don't play as Ryu Hayabusa, I think our main characters are actually cool. They have personalities, they're likable, they have some clear motivations, and they get their time to shine. They're way better than, say, Yaiba. Then again, I feel like a fucking brick flying through my window is a more likable protagonist than Yaiba. When it comes to the story, writing, characters, all that, I think it's good. Now, something that I immediately gravitated to and was like, oh yeah, that's really good, is this game's presentation. I love how this game looks, how it has sprites, and just these really well-detailed environments. Like, it doesn't look retro, but it doesn't look modern either. It's just this nice fusion, this nice mix to it, and these are some really good-looking sprites is all I will say. I love this game's aesthetic and overall presentation, and I'd love to see other games try to do a similar art style where it isn't necessarily a retro like 8-bit throwback or anything like that, but it isn't 3D or super stylized either. It just looks really nice. I don't really have anything else to say it. It's a good aesthetic. The music in this game is also incredible. Like, the music is so good. The presentation really is top notch, but where Ragebound really succeeds in my opinion above everything else is the gameplay. The moment-to-moment action is so good in this game. It is so exhilarating, engaging, and it's just such a good time. Let me explain. So you'll be playing primarily as Kenji, who has a few different moves at his disposal. He can jump, he can do a Dark Souls style dodge roll, he can do a sword slash, he can throw shurikens in any direction, and he can do this sword spin in midair that allows him to bounce off of enemies. It's actually very similar to, say, the instant shield from Sonic 3 and Knuckles. And of course, because he's a ninja, he can climb any surface really. You can just latch onto any wall and go straight up it. I think his moveset is actually really great in this game. The game absolutely takes advantage of it. These levels make the most of his abilities, and you'll have to really master them if you want to get through this game. And what really helps things is that the game has some of the best controls you'll find in any 2D game from the last few years. It just feels so good in this game. It's so smooth, it's incredibly responsive, and it just handles incredibly well. It always feels like you have perfect control over your character and their next move. Like, from the moment I started playing, I knew knew this game controlled like a dream. So this, on top of the incredible moveset and the level design actually taking advantage of it, already creates a pretty solid experience. But what makes this even better is the combat. The combat is actually really fun in this game. In the other 2D Ninja Gaiden games, the combat was pretty basic. You usually just did one little attack and the enemy died in one hit. Here, the enemies don't go down as fast. A lot of them do die in one hit, but there are plenty of enemies that will take multiple attacks in order to defeat, and some of them can even block your attacks. But what's really cool is that some enemies are glowing in this game, and depending on the color, when you defeat them, you'll basically get one super attack. This super attack will cut through their defenses and basically one-shot everything but a boss, and so the game will frequently line enemies up in a way so that you defeat these glowing enemies and then wipe out the bigger enemies in one fell swoop, and it leads to the level design just being absolutely incredible. The enemy placement's really well done, it's all carefully handcrafted, and it allows you to feel like just an absolute badass, where you really find yourself slicing and dicing through hundreds if not dozens of enemies, and it feels so good. You can just wipe out a small army of people if you know what you're doing, and it's not only incredibly satisfying, but it's also really rewarding, being just this unstoppable force slicing through everything. I just knew immediately that this game was going to be something special. I really love being able to bounce on the enemies as well. I wish more games had something like this, and the game damn well expects you to be bouncing on these enemies. They'll frequently have just enemies over bottomless pits, and you actually have to bounce on them in order to progress. And sometimes if you get creative with the bouncing, or really just your movement in general, you can go off the beaten path and find these collectibles that allow you to get some power-ups for your character also. And so there's even a little bit of exploration there. There's also some basic puzzle solving where you can actually play as the other character, the Black Spider Woman. And this also leads to some really creative platforming. There's a few vehicle sections in the game. These are actually pretty cool also, and it all really just comes together to create one of the finest 2D experiences I've had over the last few years, and easily the best one I've had in 2025. I really don't got much to complain about with this one. It's a whole lot of fun. It's not the longest, taking only around 4 or 5 hours, and it doesn't get like stupid fucking difficult like say other Ninja Gaiden games, but I think it does a decent job of ramping up the challenge, and by the end of it, it does get rather challenging. There is a little bit of replayability if you want to do these challenges or find all the collectibles, but I very much think this is a quality versus quantity experience. Yeah, it's not going to take you all that long to go through everything, but it's a damn good time, and it feels like it's incredibly replayable just thanks to how fun it is. And so with that, I 100% recommend it and think that it's worth your time, especially if you've ever been a fan of this game or 2D platformers in general. And then here we have Ninja Gaiden 4 releasing here in 2025. Again, do want to give a shout out for Microsoft for hooking me up with a review code on this one. It is very much appreciated. Now, I didn't think we'd really ever get another Ninja Gaiden in the style of the prior 3D ones. I thought if we were going to get another Ninja Gaiden, it would probably be in the style of Neo or a Souls-like, but no, this is a full-on character action game that's a really great throwback to how hack and slash games used to be. Now, when it comes to the story, it takes place quite a bit after Ninja Gaiden 3, and it actually doesn't primarily star Ryu Hayabusa. Instead, it mostly focuses on Yakumo, this new protagonist and young ninja of the Raven clan, and the game starts with him being sent on a mission to assassinate some priestess of some dark dragon that is apparently plunging the world into darkness, but things obviously get quite a bit more complicated after that. The story, like the prior 3D Ninja Gaiden titles, is just kinda all over the place, and it's probably the weakest element of the entire game. It's just kinda there, and by the end of it, I was really having a hard time actually caring about what was happening. Maybe it's just a me thing, but I felt rather indifferent to not only Yakumo, but the story in general. Like, the setting is cool. It's cool that it takes place after the third Ninja Gaiden. It's cool that they brought the antagonist from the DS game back. That's some fun fan service, but I found the story to just be kinda bland and even generic at times. And I just didn't find Yakumo to be the most interesting, compelling, or likable protagonist at times. Ryu was never all that emotive, expressive, and he didn't have much of a personality because he's a silent but deadly ninja. Yakumo, they try to give him a little bit more personality, but it just kind of fell flat for me. This whole story really just kind of felt flat for me, but you know, that's kind of in line with Ninja Gaiden. I'm not going to sit here and act like the other 3D titles had amazing stories with superb writing, characters, dialogue, etc. This is pretty in line for this series as a a whole. I was just hoping this game would maybe buck the trend and have something truly great, but alas. You're here for the gameplay anyway, so let's just talk about the gameplay. So even though the advertisements and the trailers show a lot of Ryu, I'll just be blunt, like 80% of the game sees you playing as Yakumo. You only play as Ryu at the very end of the game, and after you beat the game, you can play through the entire game as him, which is cool, but I was hoping maybe it was going to be a bit more 50-50. At the very least though, Yakumo does have a lot of abilities and tools at his disposal. He's not some lesser version of Ryu, he can kick a lot of ass too. So when it comes to the core moment-to-moment gameplay of Ninja Gaiden 4, it's most similar actually to Ninja Gaiden 2. It's just a straight up character action game. It is not a Souls-like, there is no souls or leveling up or circle strafing or any RPG elements really here at all. It is a straight character action game that we just don't see enough of in the modern gaming landscape, and it absolutely kicks ass. I'll just immediately say that this game feels great. While positioning doesn't matter as much and it doesn't feel as weighted and it is a bit faster than the other Ninja Gaiden titles, it still feels incredible. They absolutely nailed the feel and control here. Something else that I think they nailed is the combat. The combat is great in this game. There's a few different weapons for Yakumo and they all feel incredibly different from each other, like they have completely different playstyles, movesets, strengths, weaknesses, etc. and swapping between them is easy and seamless. I love just how different these weapons feel from each other, and some weapons are clearly better than others when it comes to certain enemies, which actually adds even more depth to the whole thing. While the combat isn't as deep as the fucking Atlantic Ocean, like say DMC5, it is nowhere near as shallow as a little puddle, and it actually has a lot more going on than even Ninja Gaiden 3 did. It might actually have the most advanced combat of the entire series, and the enemy roster is no slouch here either. There's actually a pretty good variety. There are plenty of human enemies that you will just get to maim and destroy, but there's tons of monsters and demons here. There's plenty of returning enemies, including those annoying ass fish that latch onto you, but there's also a lot of new ones, and there's a good amount of bosses here, and the bosses are absolute spectacles. The bosses are a highlight for sure. What I'm trying to say is, when it comes to what really matters in a Ninja Gaiden title, you know, the combat, they absolutely nailed it. They did a great job. Not only does it feel like a small evolution on what prior games did, but it also plays and feels great in its own right, and honestly, everything else about the game could be absolutely terrible, but with combat this good, it would still be a pretty decent game. But there are a few other decent things to it. The level design, while being incredibly straightforward and linear, is still alright. It feels like a roller coaster at times, and they're putting you on a bunch of crazy set pieces, but honestly, that's what you want for an action game like this. And even though the game likes to reuse assets, environments, and set pieces from time to time, I still found it all to be rather enjoyable. And the platforming / interacting with the environment were nice distractions in between the combat. And there is actually a little bit of exploration. If you go off the beaten path, you're usually rewarded for it, and you're usually given some of the two games' currencies, allowing you to get a bunch of new techniques. I'm not going to act like the level design or structure and pacing absolutely blew me away, but hey, I think it was pretty solid and it's very much in line with what this series has. Something else in line that I feel like I should bring up for Ninja Gaiden 4 is the difficulty. This is nowhere near as difficult as some of the older ones. I died a fair amount, but I wouldn't say the game is brutally difficult, it's just challenging. Something else that's in line is the presentation. While it's not an absolute stunning game, it's not the biggest looker, it still is good for the most part graphically. I still think the game looks more than nice enough, and the important thing is that it actually runs super well. It was super smooth, never had any issues on my computer, really rock steady, 60 FPS, and that's exactly what matters here. The game can look like ass, but as long as it runs well, that's really what matters. It's all to, you know, service the combat because the combat is so good. Music was actually pretty decent here as well. So overall, Ninja Gaiden 4 really is a return to form for the series. It's what the series has needed after such a long time, and while I don't think it's the very best of the Ninja Gaidens and it struggles in a few areas, I have no problem saying Ninja Gaiden is totally back. This game is totally worth checking out if you liked any of the old games or if you enjoy character action games. At $70, that is pretty steep, I'm not gonna lie. The game's around 10 to 11 hours, and I wouldn't say that it's exactly the most replayable. I just feel like I'm not going to be coming back to this one like I have with Ninja Gaiden 2, Black, etc. So maybe check this one out on Game Pass if you still have it, or wait for a pretty hefty discount. These kinds of games usually go pretty cheap pretty fast. Either way, I'm really happy that Ninja Gaiden's back, and I'm sure plenty of y'all are wondering, well, why isn't this game higher than if it's so good? Well, the truth is I just like the other games more. But believe me, it's not by much. Speaking of. And so here we have Ninja Gaiden 2, originally releasing for the 360 in 2008, but it was eventually re-released as Ninja Gaiden Sigma 2, that's what's in the Master Collection, and it was most recently released as Ninja Gaiden 2 Black. So yeah, I'm just combining all of these versions, and the gameplay you see here is from Ninja Gaiden 2 Black. Now, Ninja Gaiden 2 is actually decently different from the original in a number of key aspects, but first, let's start with the plot. The game takes place after Ninja Gaiden Black, and it sees, surprise surprise, the Black Spider Ninja Clan rolling up and causing trouble, but make it double because there's a bunch of other crazy shit that happens in this game, and it's up to Ryu to just kinda stop it all. The story of Ninja Gaiden 2 goes pretty crazy in this game, like there's tons of wacky shit, there's cultists, demons, dragons, there's a bunch of crazy shit going on, and I'll be real, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense. I've never really been able to make heads or ass of Ninja Gaiden 2's story no matter how many times I've played through it. It's just kinda there, it doesn't get in the way, and it kinda feels like more of an excuse to put you into these really awesome situations than anything else. And you know what, that's totally fine with me, that's why I'm coming to a game like Ninja Gaiden 2. And I appreciate that it goes balls to the walls. It really matches the action of this game. This is one of the most balls to the walls action games you will ever play. Like, this game goes absolutely insano mode, more so than any other Ninja Gaiden game to date. If you thought God of War or Devil May Cry got pretty crazy, you haven't seen just how truly nutty Ninja Gaiden 2 will get. And I truly mean that in a positive way. The first thing I'll say about it is that the game feels great. Ryu controls incredibly well, the combat is smooth, tight, fluid, fast, visceral, gory, and most importantly, satisfying. You will absolutely shred through enemies in this game. You will annihilate them with your many techniques and weapons. When it comes to what Ryu can do in this game, it's more so than maybe any other Ninja Gaiden title. You get so many weapons in this game, like this game is just constantly giving you weapons almost every single level, and they all behave differently. They all have their own attributes, strengths, weaknesses, and movesets, and it's so much fun to just swap between all of these weapons and trying all of them out. Like, yeah, the sword is really great, but a lot of these also go crazy, especially when you start upgrading them and start getting new moves for all these weapons. Like, Ryu can do some absolutely loony, bonkers shit in this game, especially when you start charging up moves and Ryu starts gaining momentum. Like, you just go fucking nuts. You'll chop the shit out of these things. You will grind these fuckers into dust, and it is so much fun. It is always such a great time to just absolutely eviscerate enemies in this game. It doesn't really matter which version of the game you're playing, you will eviscerate them. While the Sigma version didn't have as much gore as the original, Black actually does bring a lot of it back, and it's still incredibly gory and at times a little hard to watch, but man is it satisfying, especially when you just wipe out fools left and right. And there's actually a bit of depth and strategy here. There's actually, some complexity. You can't just turn your mind off for this one. Okay, maybe if you're really good at the game, you can. But for most people, that's not going to be the case, thanks to just the sheer amount of moves you can do, all the different weapons, the many different enemy types. There's actually a lot of variety here, and the game is decently challenging still. It isn't stupid fucking difficult where I want to rip the new hair off my head in anger, but this isn't a walk in the park, not by any means, except maybe these bosses. Some of them you can absolutely annihilate in like seconds, but most of them are going to give you a run for your money. But at the end of the day, you know what Ninja Gaiden 2 does? It makes you feel fucking powerful. You feel unstoppable in this game. You actually do feel like a badass ninja, where you can just chop through everything that moves, and it's genuinely so much fun. I've actually played through every version of this game at this point, the 360 version, the Sigma version, and now the Black version, and yeah, it's always just so much fun. And I feel like few hack and slash games can touch the intensity of Ninja Gaiden 2. Is it a bit over the top? Does it go too balls to the walls, dick in the electric socket? Yeah, absolutely, and I'm sure there are plenty of people that don't really care for how crazy this game gets or liked the more methodical, slower approach of Black, but I like both of them. I think both combat styles are great, and I think both of them are really fun. And I don't think that anybody can deny that this game has some of the flashiest combat of any hack and slash game ever. I will say though, outside of the combat, things are pretty lacking here. The complex, structured level design of Black, where it was a little non-linear and there was some exploration, yeah, that's just completely gone. Now it's just hallways where you're just always moving forward. It's incredibly streamlined, simple, basic, and yeah, there's barely any design to the level design. It feels like these are more so just transition periods to get to the next big fight rather than being an integral part of the game like Black. But hey, it's way better than whatever Yaiba and 3 had, and most people probably didn't come to this looking for decent level design. They came here looking for fast-paced, intense combat, and you certainly get that in spades. And depending on which version you're playing, the presentation might be good or really good. I always thought this was a good-looking game, but this new black version actually looks pretty great. Yeah, it is an Unreal and can look a little generic at times, but the lighting is really well done. The environments look nice. Yeah, everything actually looks pretty nice here. And if you're going to play any version of Ninja Gaiden 2 at this point, well, you can't really go wrong with any version, but I'd probably recommend the black version above them all. It's the most accessible, and I do think it is a bit better than Sigma 2. All in all, if you're somebody that likes action games or hack and slash games or good character action games and you haven't tried this, I don't know what you're waiting for. Drop everything, go try this one. It doesn't get much crazier than this. And while I know this game isn't everybody's cup of tea, it's one of my favorite action games of all time, and it's almost my favorite Ninja Gaiden. And then here we have it, the fan favorite, the GOAT, the original 3D Ninja Gaiden. Whether it's the black version, the Sigma version, doesn't really matter too much. This game has always been just an absolute masterpiece. I'm sure there are plenty of people that prefer 2 and maybe even 4 now, but the original Ninja Gaiden has always been the one that has hit the hardest for me. Even back when this game came out, they knew it was just a certified masterpiece. When it comes to this game's story, it's actually pretty shrimple, especially when compared to some of the other Ninja Gaiden titles, and it probably is the best story in the entire series. Taking place in modern day, it sees you playing as Ryu Hayabusa, who's this master ninja in his quest to recover a stolen sword and avenge the slaughtering of his clan. It's a pretty similar story to the NES titles, but it feels beefed up in the best possible way. It actually makes sense, it's easy to follow, it's slightly compelling, and I feel like low-key it's the only 3D Ninja Gaiden story I've ever really cared about. Everything else was either just kind of there or I felt indifference, but as always, you're not really playing this game or this series for the story, its characters, writing, etc. You're playing for some kick-ass gameplay, and this game absolutely excels in that. When it comes to the combat, I really think it's like the best of the entire series still. It is pretty different from the direction that the series would end up taking. It's not this balls to the walls insanity that the second game and on would have. It's actually a lot more rooted in realism. I say that as you're a fucking ninja fighting demons, but it's a lot slower, it's more methodical, you aren't doing these 300-400 plus combos, the movement is really important, positioning is super important, where you are in the environment's important, what kind of enemy you're facing is important, the weapon of course really changes things up. There's a lot of depth here, deceptively so. And while I've always enjoyed the balls to the walls shit, I love my Ninja Gaiden 2 and now 4, I do actually like this approach more. It is a little bit more satisfying, at least in my opinion. It does a really good job of ramping up not only the difficulty but the action and just how crazy things start to get, and you also don't get like desensitized to just how much crazy shit is going on screen. And so when you start to do those really impressive techniques or combos, it has a lot more impact, it feels a lot more meaningful, and it makes it, at least in my opinion, a little bit more enjoyable. I've seen plenty of people say the opposite, saying that they prefer the crazy approach of the other ones, this one's too slow, basic, simplistic, whatever you want to call it. I disagree. I think we can agree though at the end of the day that the combat is really solid and it's actually aged incredibly well, and that it's going to take a minute to get used to the movement. Ryu is a lot heavier in this game than any of the other 3D titles, and if you play this game after playing 2 and on, it might feel a bit jarring at first, but I think you'll really come to enjoy it. I certainly did. I also really love the enemy roster in this game. It has tons of different enemies and you actually need different approaches for pretty much all of them. And I, again, like how the game continues to ramp things up slowly. When you start the game, you're just fighting other humans, other ninjas, but eventually you're fighting demons, dragons, and all sorts of crazy shit. And at first you won't be fighting more than 1 or 2, maybe 3 enemies at once. And then by the end of the game, yeah, they're just throwing tons upon tons of enemies at you and you just gotta hack and slash your way through everything. But they really ramp up to it. And naturally, the difficulty ramps up as well. I will say, out of all the Ninja Gaiden titles, this really might be like the most challenging one of them all. This game is no joke. It is incredibly difficult. You can watch your life bar just get eviscerated in seconds. Enemies can be incredibly punishing, and the bosses are some of the toughest bosses of any hack and slash game. I quite enjoy the bosses of this game, but I'll be the first to admit some of them haven't aged all that well, and a lot of them are really gonna whip your ass. The game loves to kick your shit Gaiden, but it also loves it when you kick it back, when you start getting hella good, when you become the master ninja and you start whipping the game's ass, and it becomes immensely satisfying. Overcoming the difficulty feels so good in this game. When you've really mastered the movement and controls and you're firing off on all cylinders, it just feels incredible. None of the other Ninja Gaiden titles have that aha moment or feeling that this game had. Granted, they don't really go for it either. They go for something completely different, but I just really love the approach of the original 3D Ninja Gaiden. Something else that I really love about this game is the level design. It's not like the other ones whatsoever. The other ones are all straightforward linear affairs, not this original one. It's actually very non-linear. You get to explore around. It's very similar to, say, DMC 1 or 3 when it comes to the level design, and I actually found it to be a whole lot of fun. I enjoyed exploring these areas, I enjoyed finding all the nooks and crannies and secrets, and I enjoyed fighting enemies in these locations as well. I think the level design is arguably the best of the entire series. It has the most design behind it. It's not just a bunch of straight corridors, it actually has a lot going on here, and I think it's great even nowadays. A few areas certainly haven't aged all that well, and at times the game can feel a little cheap, but on balance, I think it's pretty good. I think the presentation is also still really good. It was a great looking game for the time, and I think it looks nice even nowadays with solid lighting, environments, character models, etc. Music is pretty good as well. This game really just kicks ass, and there's a reason it's still one of the best action games ever made. Does it have some flaws? Oh, absolutely. Like I mentioned, the game has some moments that haven't aged well. When you play as any of the other characters besides Ryu, which are funny enough exclusive to the Sigma version, it's not great. They don't feel or handle or control as well as Ryu, but I mean, they're pretty short segments, so it's really not the end of the world. The difficulty can be absolutely brutal at times too, where you're just like, holy shit, this game is hard as fuck, and it definitely reminds me of the NES titles. I would say that this game is probably the closest the 3D games ever got to the 2D games, where it feels like it really was a 2D to 3D transition, where all of the great stuff from the NES titles are here in this 3D title, as opposed to the later games which go and do their own thing, which again is totally fine. I love those games as well. It's just something I noticed. I love Ninja Gaiden Black. It's one of my absolute favorite hack and slash titles, and I think that everybody should check it out. Even if you're somebody who doesn't traditionally like these types of games, I think you're still going to enjoy it. I have no problem giving it my highest recommendation. It's an absolute masterpiece and worth your time. And that's it for today's video. I think I've talked enough Ninja Gaiden for a while. It'll probably be a while before I talk about Ninja Gaiden again, but in the meantime, you know you got plenty of shit to play. So if you made it to the end of this long video, you can comment long, because yeah, this is a long one, but you know, I love rambling, so talk to y'all later. Bye-bye.